All right, welcome to the show. My guest today is a brain cancer survivor, a 3 times Tedx speaker, and a best-selling author of a book titled Starting at the Finish Line. His name is Matt Newman. It was a great conversation, and it was a very inspirational story. Here's Matt Newman.
Yeah, it's funny. We learn the greatest lessons in life at the deepest and darkest of times. We can be gifted with this new set of lenses that we see life through that didn't really exist until we took on these challenges, things we didn't sign up for. We were forced into them, and we only had one thing inside of us, and that was to fight and do everything we can to move things forward. And what starts to happen often is, for all the optimism we could learn about, we find different ways that we appreciate the moment. We live in the now. We don't worry as much about yesterday or tomorrow. We can get these gifts, these silver linings during these negative moments, and we can take them, we can make them ours, and we learn lessons that are priceless. There's no real monetary value to them. At the same time that's going on, we're often pushing a lot of negativity down into our bellies. For all the optimism that we could portray, we all have our battles, our demons, our scars. Everyone's got them. There's nobody who has this photoshopped perfect image of themselves. That doesn't exist. We all have something that we've taken on in life. And what we need to do is we need to find an outlet for that. If we're pushing it deep down into our belly and we don't find an outlet, we're going to combust. Writing became an outlet for me for all the challenges that I took on. I never wrote in my life. I never anticipated anybody would read anything. I did it for me. And I found this way that I can maintain this positive perspective by finding a way to get rid of all that negativity I was pushing down deep. And that's when I started writing. And when I originally started writing, I'll share this with you, I sent emails out to friends and family. It was my finding of clarity. I would talk about how living in the moment is important, understanding how precious life truly is, how we shouldn't have to go through all this negativity to know how lucky we are, and how our biggest asset, which is time, is something, if we give it away, we don't get it back. And we have a very interesting shelf life with time. We can't get more of it if we want. And I would write, and I would send it out to friends and family. I never read one email after I sent it out. I did it for me. It made me feel better. 4 years later, I had 20,000 people that were following my emails. And I would get this every day. Hey, Matt, could you put this person on, that person on? Do you mind doing this? And a lot of what I wrote about was the lessons I learned after being diagnosed with brain cancer. And I realized that cancer is like buying a car. You buy a car, you leave the lot, you go, look at that. I see the car everywhere. Wrong. The car was always there. You just never noticed it till you had a direct connection with it. And then you saw it everywhere that you went. Every family is affected in some way or another. Everybody's got their battles. Everybody's got the fights that they're thrust into. And they're looking for inspiration. They're looking for connection. I was doing this for myself. So I decided I'd write a book. I decided I would write that because it was a more cathartic measure to help me alleviate the fact of the disease that I was fighting. And on March 23rd, 2018, my book was coming out. There was no ghostwriter. There was no marketing company. There was no business plan. There was no publisher. I wrote it 100% to make myself feel better. And my mom calls me up in Parsippany, New Jersey, and she goes, hey, what's going on? I go, hey, Mom, the book's coming out tonight. And she goes, you know no one's ever going to read it, right? Who cares about me? Why would they read my book? She goes, but you're going to put 3 copies in your safe. So when your kids are old enough, they'll be able to read the reality of what actually you went through. I said, Mom, I couldn't agree more. And 1 week later, we were #1 on Amazon in 4 different categories, and my jaw hit the ground. There was no expectation. There was no nothing. And what you realized is people are attracted to realness and purity. And that became apparent.
you were never doing it for anybody else, always for yourself, and it came from within, and that relatability was only from that trueness that you were projecting.
That's it. And I never planned a new business approach to speaking and all this other stuff, even though I spoke in finance for years. That was something that I did. But what you started to get a better understanding of was people started to read it and they started to reach out to me. When I wrote that book, I wasn't on social media. That's why I would send those emails out. I wanted nothing to do with it. I had my own business. I had everything. Everything was going fine. I had to go on social media because people are trying to reach out to me and connect with me. And the messages I would get, there's one today that I put out. I get them every day of people needed to know that I'm not alone. There's others like me. And it's not just about cancer, suicide, depression, all these other things. Everybody's encapsulated into something where they have their issues. But what I realized is my catharsis was to write about it, to speak about it, to get it out. Most people don't want to talk about it unless it's with someone that can relate. And that became clear to me. After the book came out, 2 weeks later, I got a call from ESPN in New York. They want to put me on. I thought it was my brother Crank calling me. I'm like, yeah, you want to put me on ESPN. You want this guy on there. We were on there. And then I started to do TED Talks. And then I started to speak all over the place. And what you realize is people are sick of the shtick. They don't want some canned speaker reading from some cue cards, giving me a bunch of crap statistics nobody cares about. They want honesty. They want integrity. They want to know that there's other people who've taken on these challenges and succeeded. I did it as a catharsis, but I realize now that it happened for a reason.
Is there an audiobook? Did you do the audiobook as well?
It's funny you say that. I've been asked a million times. I need to do it. And I need to do it because I'm the guy who speaks all over the place on all these, interview shows and stuff. And it needs to come from the heart. It needs to be real. I wouldn't be able to live with it another way. But one of the things I try to point out as well, too, is that we all learn lessons in life. They're everywhere. It's whether we choose to acknowledge them or not. But the biggest thing that I saw was people giving back the lessons they learned after things got better. And that became something that I would never allow myself to do. So I'm sitting in my office right now. You can't see it from this angle, but up in the corner right there, my radiation mask stares at me every single day. Every time I get in a bad mood, every time something's going on, I want to look at that mask. I want to go, remember where you've been. Don't change who you are. You earn this. For all the negativity and the fear that comes along with life-altering diseases, changes, all this other stuff that can be thrown onto our laps that we never asked for, we can always find something we can find ownership in there. Some type of lesson, learn something. And by us utilizing that and hanging on to it, it makes our lives better and it defines us going forward. If you think about it, we all know someone who's lost a ton of weight. They did a great job and 3 years later, they gained it all back. I know people that have been through life-altering diseases, cancer, all this, and they made 100% recovery and they went right back to the person that they were. The disease won. They won in that situation. You didn't take what they were offering to you. I tell you a funny story. I had a full craniotomy done on my head. I have a scar that goes from here all the way around here. You could barely see it. They had to pull my head off, take the tumor out. While I'm going through this, my father-in-law is dying of pancreatic cancer. I got 3 kids under 5 years old in the same household. You can't make this story up. One time I'm talking to the surgeon. I said, I wish you didn't do such a good job, man. He looks at me and goes, what? What'd you say? I go, you could barely see the scar. He goes, yeah, we did a great job. I go, I wish I could see it. He goes, what? I go, every time I got in a bad mood, every time I had some anger, some negativity, and I look in the rearview mirror of my car, I'll be reminded, go easy. Remember how lucky we are to have life. And he kind of shook his head at me. And that's when I did my entire arm of art, which is my story of going through this, every bit of it. So every time I take a shower, every time I take my shirt off, every time I can rekindle the fact that I earned these lessons and I will hold on to them forever.
When you were writing this book and, upon that process, what made you want to go ahead and do that? Was it to fight negative emotions? Was it to distract the mind? Or like you said, you started to write the book for yourself. Were you always journaling growing up? Was journaling something you had integrated into your schedule, or did this come later in life?
So it's interesting how we get these seeds planted into us when we're young. They get brought to us usually by parents or by people that we look up to. they may not bloom till much later in life. When I grew up, like I mentioned, it was right outside New York City. My father was a financial advisor. My mother was a school teacher, and she taught something called ESL, which is English as a Second Language. They would teach me these lessons that correlated to their occupation that I didn't care about. Like, why are you bothering me with that? It's all about sports, it's about school, it's about having fun, all these other things you can go through. So I graduated from the University of Delaware in 1996. And I'll never forget, we're in that beautiful blue cap and gown, standing on the football field, Maya Angelou giving her amazing commencement speech. My father walks over to me in this thick Bronx accent. He's like, hey, man, college graduate, right, buddy? I'm like, dude, the king has arrived, man. College graduate, right? Not bad. And he goes, what do you want to do now? I go, Dad, I'll become a financial advisor. I'm going to join your firm. That's what I want to do. And in his thick Bronx accent, and I will clean my language up for your audience, he said, there is no bleeping way you're joining my firm. And I was pissed and I was angry. And every picture of me is like, jerk off, like at graduation. He was teaching me one of the greatest lessons in life. There's no free lunches. You got to learn it. If it's your craft, if it's your passion, it's something you believe in, then we'll talk in a few years, but you go figure it out on your own. And that's how I got into finance, is that I had a chip on my shoulder. And as I got into it, and I passed all my tests and I realized that a lot of these seeds were blooming. We hear about the term financial planning. We think it's about money. That's not true. It's about preparation. It's about making sure the basics are set up. And shame on the US education system, and I did a TED talk on this. We teach kids how to get into the real world. We teach them to become adults. We educate them. And again, mom teacher. But we don't teach them about how to pick the right employee benefits, what a power of attorney is, what a will is. We don't teach them the things to do that, God forbid, something bad happens, they don't have regret, resentment, and negativity thinking I woulda, shoulda, coulda. And because of that, I learned the basic lessons of planning. The job of the financial advisor is to be there when things are bad, to give people good news when they truly need it the most, to have a plan set up prior to the negative. People want life insurance when they can't get it. People want long-term care when they can't get it. They want a financial plan when they lose 30%. By having things in place, you could take on the battle at hand without this weight on your shoulders of the disdain you have for what you did to the people that matter most in your life. So those seeds bloomed in me. And that's how I started my occupation after I went through cancer. And like I said, my father-in-law died of pancreatic cancer. I have brain cancer, which means to most people you're going to die. 3 kids under 5 years old. I started writing. I had never written before in my life. But seeds started blooming from my mother 39 years later. And I realized that it took a long time, but that was something she brought to the table for me. And I then used that as my cathartic measure to keep my optimism and get rid of the negativity that I was trying to push down, because it had to get some outlet. Otherwise, something bad would happen.
Absolutely. Can we talk about moving forward, what the book has been like now, the responses, where the book is now? You've done TED Talks, you've been passing along this information. Have people been reaching out to you, Matt, and saying, wow, I haven't read something like this, I really, what's that been like?
Yeah, humbling is not even the word I could say. That doesn't even do it justice. As we're on here, I put all my stuff on, do not disturb and all that. I literally got one as we're talking right now from someone. I started to get messages every single day. I never expected a soul to read this. It was literally my outlet, like I'd mentioned. But what you started to have a deeper understanding of was, it's not really about, do I have cancer and can I relate to this person? It's everybody's looking for some type of rawness, a real component of inspiration and motivation. Something to let them know, well, if that person did it, I could do it. I did it with no intent for anybody to ever read it. When I started doing speaking and whatnot, I knew I was a good speaker. It's something I did in finance. But when I started to do it from realness, you started to realize that it's about connecting at the heartstrings. It's about letting people know we are absolutely the same person. We all have our struggles that we have, and it's okay. My cathartic measures of airing it out was getting messages from people on a daily basis that they needed that at that given moment. And it wasn't about cancer. It could have been suicide, depression, all these other things that people were dealing with. And it made you realize I used to believe in irony. I don't believe in irony any longer. I think things happen for a reason. I will say this. I get this a lot. So you're glad this happened? No, I'm not glad this happened. My father-in-law died of cancer. I got 3 kids under 5 years old going through this. We've been through helicopter crashes and all this other stuff if you read the book. You can't make it up what happened. But I could sit there and complain about it and cry about it. Or I could take ownership of my time that I'm allotted and try and be the best person and dad that I can be. And that's what I go forward with.
And that attributes to life as well. We all just want to be the best performers in our field. And, you know, that's the thing with financial planning. Back to that, let's say somebody is terrible at their financial planning and they haven't done any of that stuff. And they've got debts through and through and they're really down there in that sinking ship. How do you save those people from, you know, jumping off of that bridge?
You know, it's okay to start later. It's by never beginning that you're defining yourself to your family. And one of the things I talk a lot about is after I got married, we were expecting my first child about 9 months after our marriage. I'll let you guys figure out the numbers on that one right there. And we're living in Philadelphia. And my father said to me, he goes, "What do you say every day?" This is about 2 months before my first is born. It's 2007. He says, "What do you say every day to financial advisors and people in your community? Our job is to be there when things are bad. Our job is to give people good news at the deepest and darkest of times. Our job is to have a plan in place prior to the negative and give people some semblance of positivity when they need it the most. That's the job of a planner." He goes, "Yeah. Do you practice everything you preach?" I go, "Yeah, Dad, of course. That's the way we live." He goes, "Did you do your power of attorney?" I go, "Well, Dad, I didn't get that done. I can do that on LegalZoom for like $19. He goes, "Did you do your will? You're about to take on more responsibility, bigger obligations. Did you do that?" I go, "Well, Dad, I didn't get that." He goes, "Did you do all your life insurance planning?" "Dad, I just did the Tough Mudder 2 weeks ago. I just ran the Broad Street Run, the biggest 10-mile run in the country in Philly. I'm a fitness guy." "So you don't practice everything you preach?" And I nodded my head. I said, "Yeah." And over the next 2 weeks, I did it all. But here's the point I want to give you why I'm sharing that. Everything I just mentioned has nothing to do with money. Those are legal documents that I get to choose if something happens to me, who's going to make all the decisions. If something happens to me, how are things going to get siphoned out? There's little basic things we could do that we get no education on to eliminate. Could you imagine I'm laying in that hospital? I got no life insurance. My wife and kids, if I die, because it's a good possibility, they're going to have to move. My kids might not go to college. This is basic stuff. That's called regret, resentment, negativity. And you fall down what's called the downward spiral. And for those watching this who don't know what the downward spiral is, we've all heard of the family. Been married for 50 years, husband and wife. They're in their 80s. Husband dies, wife's healthy as a horse. What do we often hear happens 6 months later to the wife? She dies. Because when you fall into the downward spiral, you fall into this regret, resentment, negativity. The American Medical Association did a study on this. The odds of getting out of it are almost zero. There's some diseases that will take us physically. There's nothing we could do about it, but they will never take us spiritually. We define who we are and the message that we leave to our loved ones. But there's some diseases we have a chance to beat. And you know what the number one most important thing to have for that is? Attitude. And if you're in a downward spiral, what have you lost? So by not having that basic type of planning in place, it allowed me to take on any battle there and fight with everything I had in me. If things didn't work out, my family knew what they had, but more importantly, they saw me give it everything I had to be with them. That's not about what mutual fund did you invest in or how much money did you make at work. So I believe having that type of planning in place allowed me to fight with everything I had inside me without any regret, resentment, or negativity.
Yeah. Now, let's say somebody wants to go ahead and start moving forward with this process after hearing this. What's the first thing that they should do?
So, yeah, the first thing they want to do, which is very simple, depending on, how serious they are, how much money they have, find a good financial advisor, a financial planner, someone who's going to sit down and map everything out with you. I don't want to pay for this. I don't want to pay for that. Okay. I can learn how to fix the engine in my car if I really want to, but I'm really cool with my mechanic, and I'm more than happy to pay him because he's way more of an expert than I am on something like that. Delegation is something that pays off in spades. It's something that really works. My business, I wanted to be in control of everything. When I started delegating out, it shot through the roof because you can't be there in perpetuity for everything. So if you know an estate planner, talk to them. Find a good financial advisor to help you put a plan in place. More importantly, if you just want to do your legal documentation, your will, go on LegalZoom. Do it yourself. You can knock that out right there. But I will point this out. Most people want, like I said before, what they can't get. It's a perfect time for you to make sure that as your family is expanding, as you are growing, that you never have to take on a challenge and then hold yourself accountable for not doing things, which will pour you into that downward spiral.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing that you are providing for the future wealth and generations that are to come for you. This all is about legacy, and it's something that people need to understand. You can have the Mercedes and the nice wallet and the jacket, but people really think about the things that you did. At the end of your run, whenever that is for anybody, it really does come down to, man, he lived with a lot of regret. Everybody knows that. I once heard this really interesting quote, and it was something along the lines of, you really get to know a man when you speak to his closest people, right? His children, his wife, his mother. His relationship with those people is where you can sort of assess. And what I took from that is, how you maneuver through your life and the choices you make and the planning for the future versus the short-term stuff that you just, it all adds up at the end. And it's really inspiring to see that you're providing this for people so that they don't make those choices, those wrong choices, because it's lack of information sometimes. Sometimes it's they don't have those resources. They say, well, back to what you were saying earlier, nobody says this stuff to you, and then they end up blaming themselves or other people, and then that sort of gets them in that downward spiral as well. It's like, how could I be so dumb not to look into this? And
that's exactly right, and that's well said. And it's something that, if you think about it from a holistic perspective, I was giving speeches on this all over the place, on protection, planning. I can go through the whole thing. I'll never forget laying in a hospital bed. They bring me in. I get diagnosed with a brain tumor. They bring me back to the bed, and I remember sitting there thinking, every speech I ever gave was about me. I didn't know it. I was 39 years old. You don't get brain cancer at 39. This isn't supposed to happen. It's about my father-in-law who's clinging on for dear life. It's about my children. It's about my wife. It's not about me. But once I was able to establish that I can focus on the fight and I don't got to worry about this stuff, it immediately went into beast mode. And I get asked this all the time. I'll share it with you. Were you scared? No, I wasn't. And that sounds weird. I didn't know I had that in me. I was crying in bed. I was trying to think there's a reason this should have happened. I'm going to die. I got brain cancer. And it just hit me. And once I realized that I had everything taken care of and I can go down swinging, I wasn't scared about surgery. I wasn't scared about chemo. I don't know why, but I think the less concern you have about everything around you, the more you could focus on you at that given moment. And I wasn't nervous. And I don't know why, but I wasn't.
Well, Matt, it's clear that your story is a very inspiring one, and you've been doing lots of great things for people to go ahead and learn from your story, and a lot of it is not it's all just for the value that they take from it. That's all it is. It's evident that that's what you want to do, and it's, again, you could be doing other things, but you're here podcasting. You weren't a podcaster, you weren't a social media star, but here you are with people reaching out to you and wanting to hear more, and you got TED Talks, and it's really inspiring that you chose to turn a negative into a positive in many ways. And that being said, upon that transition, today, in your life today, this is your new way of doing things, right? This is with the financial advising. Where does that stand? Where are you at today, man?
Yeah, so I do a multitude of different things. We wholesale financial products. We help people as far as giving them guidance. The other thing we do the most of now, or I shouldn't say the most of, the other thing is that we had to build this company for speaking and for booking. I never thought that would happen in a gazillion years. And I remember my accountant being like, dude, you got to build a company here. And I was like, I'm just doing this for the betterment of everybody or whatnot. But it created this opportunity to share and connect. And what I found was that when you can mutually come to grips with each other, that you're on a similar platform and you're not speaking down to someone like we see too often, it can fill a room with a euphoric feeling of realness. And I know I keep using that term realness, but because that's what we all want. And that's something that I look forward to doing, because for all the people that we inspire, that we motivate, when they hear my full story, the book has, like I mentioned, helicopter crashes. You can't make this stuff up. It's the messages I receive from people, the thanks, all the updates. They're the ones inspiring me. I'm the one who's lucky. And I always get those thank yous. They don't realize I am beyond grateful because you do more for me than you realize.
Very inspiring. Matt, how can everybody find you on social media?
Yeah, I'll make it simple. So I'm going to give you my website, and I'll give it to you for a reason. It's Matthew, Matthew, S. Newman, Newman, MatthewSNewman.com. The only person who calls me Matthew is my mom, but that's the website. MatthewSNewman.com. It's got all the TED Talks. It's got ESPN interviews. It's got everything on there. All the podcasts. But it's also got all our social media on there, from Instagram to Twitter to LinkedIn. And that's how we do the majority of our communication. And we are an open book. If there's ways we can help, if there's conversation, connection, whatever we can do to support what I call the warrior community. And we're not just a community of warriors, we're a family of warriors. And family supports each other when they need them the most. So anything we could do to help you, our community, someone going through something, and very often, the family of someone who's going through something who just needs a little inspiration and motivation. It's our absolute pleasure to do that.
Very nice. Well, you heard it here, you guys. You have the website, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, man. Thank you for your time.
Oh, it's an absolute honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Matt.